Hello and welcome to another episode of Video Game Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about Gamedec, the definitive edition on the Nintendo Switch. So Gamedec is short for Game Detective, and this is basically a game about, well, just what the title says. So you're a detective that solves crimes that happen in the virtual world. In actually like a multitude of different virtual worlds. So this is basically, to elaborate on how this game plays, it is in some ways very comparable to Disco Elysium, which, if you know my opinion on that game, I've got reviews here on the channel, that is theoretically a very good thing because Disco Elysium is legitimately a masterpiece. But if you don't know what that game is, and so therefore that comparison is meaningless to you, then Gamedec here is basically a visual novel or choose your own adventure book, thinly disguised as an interactive experience. So far as I can tell, there is no way to lose this game. Different choices just lead to different outcomes. Presumably. I say that because I've only played through the game once, so I don't know whether the choices you make have, like, how much of a true impact they have versus are the choices really an illusion that lead to more or less the same outcome. Anyway, like I said, it may sound like I'm describing the amazing Disco Elysium in a lot of ways. These two games definitely share some similarities, but Gamedec feels much less like an actual game to me and much more, like I said, like a visual novel type of experience. The decisions, certainly at times, for me at least, didn't really feel like they carried much weight here in Gamedec because I wasn't really invested in the characters or the story all that much. It didn't feel that the characters, for the most part, really had much of a personality. There's this one guy who's kind of a sidekick, and depending how you play, you can kind of get him on your team for a while, at least. And I liked his character, but he was really one of the few that I kind of engaged with throughout my playthrough. And I personally would have liked to see them develop that a little bit more, or spend some more time with him, or spend some time developing some of the other many characters in this game. And they either chose not to do that, or they just didn't pull it off successfully. I'm not sure which. So it may sound like I don't like this game. That's not entirely true either. It is a good experience. I just think, as usual, it's important that you have a better idea of what it is that you're potentially getting into with this one. You could also liken it, again, very similar to Disco Elysium, you could liken it to a classic point and click game, but just one in which you can't really lose and you can't really get stuck. You can pretty much always push forward in this game. There are no ridiculous, illogical, like, item combination puzzles. You're not combining like a rubber duck with a record player and a slingshot to craft a machine gun, or like there's none of those puzzles, which, maybe you like those puzzles. Some people do, but I also know a lot of people don't, and I'm definitely one of those. So anyway, you won't find those here, which is potentially positive for you. Now, the one thing I can say in Gamedec's favor is that it does arguably look a little better on the Switch than Disco Elysium, though Disco is, in my opinion, by far the superior game in every other way. Now, some other downsides that I will say about Gamedec: the load times are long and fairly frequent. The game, like the frame rate and everything is unbelievably choppy at times. It was so bad, in fact, that at first I thought, like, I was kind of thinking that it was possibly intentional, like an attempt at a retro, maybe like an old PC game running on underpowered hardware is what it looks like. But I honestly don't think that that's what they were going for. Never seen anyone try to emulate that exactly. And you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll put up some footage of the introduction logo, which runs so it's the worst, most laggy, choppy intro to a game that I have ever seen on the Switch. It's embarrassing. I did have the game crash a few times before the start screen. Like, I couldn't even get the game to start. It would just lock out before I could even start a file. So I had to close the game and reload it, which, isn't a huge deal. It's not like I lost save files or lost any progress or anything like that, but it definitely increased the jank factor for this game. This is a console. I don't like to see crashes, period. If your game is still crashing, like, you're not finished testing it, in my opinion. So look, Gamedec sells for $30 on the eShop, which, in my opinion, is definitely too steep. Disco Elysium, again, sells for $40, which may seem a little high, but that game is absolutely worth it. And for $10, you should be playing Disco. You should not be playing this to save $10. Now, if you've already played Disco Elysium and Gamedec happens to be on sale for, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 bucks, I'd say go for it. I got this game on sale. I can't remember how much exactly I paid for it. I do feel like it was worth whatever I paid for it, which I know was not the full price. Just some other quick points to note here on Gamedec. There's no voice acting, which is better than bad voice acting, but again, Disco Elysium knocked it out of the park in this area. Okay, like, the voice acting in Disco is one of the highlights, and here there just straight up there isn't any. So it really just comes down to, whether or to what extent you engage with the story, because if you don't engage with the story, you're not really left with a lot of game, to be honest with you. And I didn't really. I wouldn't say that I was overly enthused about the story or the characters, as I've mentioned, but sometimes it's just nice to have a game that didn't, cost you terribly much money, and, that you're not going to get your ass destroyed constantly. You're not going to constantly get beat down. Sometimes you just want to chill out and play a game. You know what I'm saying? And if that's what you're looking for, Gamedec will definitely fit that bill. That pretty much does it for this one. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please click like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys next time, whenever that may be. Bye-bye.